Why, hello again, my dearest. Still haven't forgiven me for Nickelodeon Party Blast. Well, my next review is going to be on another childhood favorite of mine, Spider-Man on the PlayStation. Yep, it was a game everybody loved. So, would you kindly get that thing out of my face so I can do the review? Thank you. Turn the light back on!
Originally released on the PlayStation in 2000, then later ported to Nintendo 64, Dreamcast, and PC throughout 2000 and 2001, Spider-Man was released to a surprising amount of acclaim from both fans and critics alike, with Tony Hawk developer Neversoft proving that 3D superhero games did have a bright future ahead of them, especially after several disasters such as Batman and Robin on PlayStation and our old friend, Superman 64. Sure, the game might be dated by today's standards, with newer Spider-Man games such as the Spider-Man 2 movie game expanding upon what it created, but it still serves as one of the games that helped put 3D superhero games on the map.
This game also holds a special place with me, as it, alongside Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4, were the last PlayStation games I bought back when they were brand new. Although, does that mean it holds up today? Or is it heavily dated? Let's go find out.
In order to effectively review this game's main story mode, I'll be talking about certain aspects of the story. So this is a spoiler warning for anyone wanting to play the game. Although it shouldn't really matter that much because this game's story isn't anything special. But that's not why we're here, we want to know how it plays. Well, anyway, the story mode features 3 main difficulty levels: easy, normal, and hard, simple enough. Aside from changing how difficult it is to fight enemies and how much health you lose per hit, the way the levels are laid out and the way they function are changed depending on the difficulty you choose. I found the curve between the difficulties to be very apparent, as I've beaten the game on easy mode plenty of times. I've beaten normal mode only about once or twice, and as for hard mode, well, I have yet to beat it. There's also a 4th difficulty level called Kid Mode.
Kid Mode!
Consider it to be the game's very easy difficulty, and a surprising convenience to the really young players of this game. Several of the controls, such as the ability to web swing, are changed to accommodate their abilities, and they're also given several handicaps such as more health, armor, and web cartridges, the inability to lose at certain sections, and outright skipping some of the harder sections altogether. But as you can see, Kid Mode is really meant for young kids, and when I say young, I'd say under 10. So if you want to experience the game properly, play it on easy or normal. Getting to the story mode itself, the basic story of this game is that Spidey is framed for stealing equipment from a science expo headed by a supposedly reformed Doc Ock. And it's his job to find out the real culprits and save NYC from a mysterious fog that has appeared. I will state right now that some of the story's plot twists are painfully obvious, though oddly enough, it still manages to capture the feeling of a comic book story, at least from the way I see it, which was probably what they were going for anyway. As for the gameplay itself, the game is split off into different levels, most of which have the basic goal of getting to the end without dying. The levels themselves are fairly short, with only 2 being long enough to warrant checkpoints. But there's still quite a few levels to go through in order to beat the game. But despite this, a single playthrough of the game will probably only take about 2 to 5 hours, depending on the difficulty you're playing on, but we'll get to that later.
Because first, we're going to talk about what made this game work. The wide variety of objectives, the different methods of playing, and most importantly, the control you have over Spider-Man's abilities.
You see, each level is not just getting from point A to point B. Aside from your standard combat sections, there are also platforming sections, puzzle solving, timed sections, and chase scenes for you to complete. And failure to do so results in the obvious, failing the level or death. On higher difficulties, several other elements come into play such as stealth, when you're required to knock out groups of bank robbers without alerting the others, or else they'll shoot captive hostages and you'll fail.
Wow. Now that I've talked about it somewhat, I think I'm beginning to realize something. Spider-Man did the 3D superhero games what GoldenEye did the first-person shooters. I mean, come on, how did I not see that connection?
Now we're going to talk about this game's most important aspect, the control you have over Spider-Man's abilities. Unlike many other superhero games released before this, you have free control over Spider-Man's powers. You almost never feel restricted in using Spidey's abilities. You can web swing from building to building, stick to walls, zip up to the ceiling, and use a variety of web attacks such as trapping enemies in webbing, firing web balls like bullets, pulling enemies towards you, covering your fists in web to make your attack stronger for a few hits, and even covering yourself in a shield that explodes! Sure, the web attacks require ammo in the form of web cartridges, but this was exactly like the Spider-Man from the comics. You didn't have infinite webbing there. You see, this is what made the game great. It's not afraid to give you access to all the abilities that Spider-Man is capable of, unlike some other disasters out there. With that out of the way, let's talk about the levels themselves. The first few levels involve you swinging through New York to stop a bank robbery. These levels contain many of the situations I already mentioned, such as hostage situations and a certain amount of puzzle solving. Followed by this, you have to save my man Jameson from Scorpion, first having to swing to the Daily Bugle within the time limit, followed by the game's first boss fight. Like I said before, the game offers different approaches to fighting the boss. You can throw furniture at him, fight him up close and personal, or you can take the easy way out and just spam the web ball. But of course, that would only take you so far, especially on higher difficulties when you have less web.
Before I get to the next section, remember when I said that this game's story is meant to represent a comic book? In the sense that it's meant to be portrayed unrealistically? Yeah, keep that in mind for me, will you?
After the boss, Jameson gets the cops and SWAT teams on Spidey, leading to a long, over-the-top, and almost ridiculous chase throughout the next few levels. A chopper chases you throughout these levels, firing a machine gun and rockets trying to gun you down. I can understand the machine gun, but why the hell would they recklessly fire these rockets every 5 seconds in an effort to kill someone who's not fighting back? Seriously, you'll start to think that these guys got their lessons from the 1998 Godzilla movie. There's this whole level where you have to crawl up a skyscraper, and they practically blow the building in half just to try and kill you. Yeah, this is a friendly image considering what happened a year after this game came out. But nevertheless, these are still fun levels to play, and while you always have to be on the move to avoid the chopper's gunfire, the challenge still feels very balanced. And while some moments may require quick reaction time, it never gets to the point where it's unfair. And one last thing, I think it's about time I mentioned the game's soundtrack. Take a listen to it. Wow. Couple this with Spider-Man's comments? Then you know you have a hell of a game on your hands.
Enough with the shooting already!
After this, you fight Rhino. On easier difficulties, all you need to do is make him run into a few generators to put him down. But on higher difficulties, they don't drain his health all the way, forcing you to get creative again with explosive barrels and getting him stuck in the wall. Once you learn how it's done, he isn't too hard to beat. Then you get into a whole set of levels trying to save Mary Jane from Venom. Unfortunately, the final chase through the city into the sewers is the last you see of the outdoor levels. I mean, don't get me wrong, some of the indoor levels you'll be encountering are still wide open enough for fans of web slinging, but it can still turn off some people that the game's main selling point, being that you swing around the city, only lasts for about half the game. These sewer levels are also the point where the game can get pretty hard on higher difficulties. The human enemies you were encountering in all the previous levels are now replaced with these lizard men that crawl around the sewers. They can take more abuse than the earlier enemies, their melee attacks are a lot stronger, and worst of all, they use this annoying spit attack that still does a lot of damage and can even sometimes knock you off the walls. Of course, they have almost perfect accuracy on higher difficulties, so this can result in a few cheap deaths and they knock you down over water. Yeah, by the way, falling in water kills you. Yippee. Also, they have this pretty strange attack where they...
Well, I guess they gotta evolve their species somehow.
Yeah, I know they're probably just feeding on him, but the question is, why so slowly? So after fighting Venom again and rescuing Mary Jane, Venom becomes a good guy, and the two of you go back to the Daily Bugle to find more information on the Spider-Man imposter. This is where the game becomes incredibly hard on hard mode, as your new enemies, the symbiotes, are extremely hard to put down. The only effective method of fighting them is finding a fire power-up for your webbing, where they can then be dispatched with a flaming web ball. Too bad this won't help too much on higher difficulties due to the fact that your web drains really fast and the fire power-up only lasts for one web cartridge. Don't even try to fight them normally, they take way too many hits to put down. Webbing your fists doesn't really seem to help. They're almost completely immune to your non-fire web attacks. They can kill you in only a few hits. They retain the Lizardmen's annoying projectile attack, and they constantly gang up on you. But thankfully, you're rarely forced to fight them, so you can run away from them most of the time. You ultimately find out that the imposter was Mysterio, who you then fight in an actually pretty difficult boss fight, once again depending on the difficulty you choose. Once you learn how it's done, you shouldn't have that much of a problem with him, but still expect to run into a few cheap deaths. Finally, you go into an underwater facility to get rid of the fog. By the way, do you want to know why the fog was used in the villain's evil plan?
But the symbiote invasion cannot be stopped!
Symbiote invasion? There are more of them?
You fool! There will be more than you can imagine! That fog which blankets the city is preparing everyone in New York for symbiosis!
So they covered New York City in fog to prepare for a symbiote invasion? How exactly would the fog help? I mean, would it blind the citizens of NYC? Would they not see it coming? Is the fog toxic? I mean, I'm sorry if I'm nitpicking, but they don't elaborate further on this plot element. And it plays a major role in the story, so questions have to be asked about this. See how ridiculous this game's plot can get?
So you go through these levels, fight more of these annoying symbiotes, you destroy the fog machine, and then find out the masterminds of this evil plot. Doc Ock and Carnage. Just so you know, I am utterly shocked by this revelation considering that we saw some obvious silhouettes of them in earlier cutscenes. You then fight Doc Ock in a pretty easy boss fight, and then fight Carnage in a pretty hard boss fight. Not only do you have to stun him with a sound generator in order to get a proper opening to attack without being cut to pieces yourself, but Carnage's voice will probably make your ears bleed.
Here I come!
So after beating Carnage, you've stopped the evil symbiote invasion plan, and you've successfully completed one of the best superhero games ever created.
And that was Spider-Man Story Mode. To wrap up, I'll be talking about this game.
Whoa! What the? Is that Hawk?
Well, any great game deserves to surprise you with one last obstacle. Or scare, whatever you prefer. The final level of this game has you running from this Doc Ock Carnage hybrid as the base explodes around you. Being that you need to web swing in order to stay ahead of Ock, you'll need quick reflexes and a huge adrenaline rush if you don't want to be mauled alive. It might take some skill, but once you do it, the game ends in a big epic finale, and you're treated to some of this game's great humor. God, I love that bikini Mysterio in the background.
Speaking of humor, that brings me to my final point about this game. The what if mode.
By entering a special cheat code... sorry, I had to get that out of the way. By entering a special cheat code, you can now play through the story mode under the Marvel Comics' What If universe, in which things play out in a different, often hilarious way.
Mini Hawk. I am Mini Hawk.
Second playthrough of this game should be warranted just for this game mode, I'm serious. Also, you can unlock several costumes by completing certain tasks in the story mode and the challenge mode, or simply by cheat code. These costumes may give you special abilities such as infinite webbing, infinite health, invisibility, or even handicap you by limiting your number of web cartridges down to 2. With all this bonus content, a relatively short game can now have tons of replay value. And with all of this, you have the game that helped define 3D superhero games. Some aspects of the story might be ridiculous, and the game can sometimes be frustrating, but never to the point where you'd want to shut the game off. If you can track down a copy of this game, whether it be for PlayStation, Nintendo 64, Dreamcast, or PC, I highly recommend it, as it serves an important part to the game industry for showing that not every superhero game was going to end up like, well, Superman 64.
And that was Spider-Man for the PlayStation. And I still think it's a great game after all these years. And see, I can love a great game just as much as anybody else can. So, no hard feelings about Nickelodeon Party Blast, right? Spoke too soon.
Here you go.
Okay.
Present for you.
In that dramatic a fashion, I thought you were gonna blow my brains out!
I don't know. Have fun!
I think I know what's coming up next.